Hi everyone, we're just having some difficulties, but we'll be starting in a sec. Does everything sound good otherwise? Hi everyone, we're just having some. Okay, that seems good. Let's get some hearts going in the chat for Lex. She gets restart open broadcast systems. Keeps crashing on her. Any minute. This time it isn't a stream issue. Is everyone having a good day? Hit like and subscribe if you're having a great day. Smash that like button. Great to hear. Great day. Yeah, Alex has these really cool transitions, and we need the software to work. Tell us a joke. Um, oh yeah. A man. How does it go? There's a diner. I saw a diner the other day that said they serve breakfast anytime. So I asked for French toast during the Renaissance. That's an art joke. Sophisticated. Pretty good. Um, That's the only joke I can think of right now. This is what's the best thing about Switzerland?
The cheese.
Woo!
Uh, hello. I am on the audio. Thank you guys so much for waiting. I really appreciate it. And I am just getting this high tech graphic system going for you guys. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for all the hearts in the chat. I can't see it right now because I don't want to have like a million windows open. Currently, my mouse is lost on the screen, but here we go. We're going to share screen in 3, 2, 1.
Amazing. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you, Lex.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there and waiting. I am super excited to talk to you tonight about a little bit of family history and my research trip. And I think it's going to be a fun night. We're going to have a little section of Q&A and comments as well, because I'm just brand new to this history, which I'll talk up a little bit about. And I know there's a lot of people watching out there who have a lot of great information. That being said, with the technical precedent made, I cannot tell you how many devices I have right now. I need to find my phone. Okay. We're armed and we're ready to go. So here we go. I'm doing something new. We're doing some transitions. Get into it. It's going to be fun. Get your food, get your drinks, get ready. We're streaming. It's 2020. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. The struggle continues. All right. So thank you for everybody who is making time to be here tonight at a time when you could be tending to any number of crises. It really means a lot to me to be graced with your attention and your energy. And so this evening, I want to provide you guys some information, tell you some stories, and give you some reflections that are filtered through the lens of a child of the Great Migration. And my hope is that these reflections can be useful and imaginative ways to think about genealogy and how we deal with history as an emotionally embodied experience of like, there's this place and then somehow I'm over here, and how do I get back over here? How do we get back to the roots? So I'm coming to you guys from New York City, which sits on, I actually don't know how to say the name of this tribe. So also drop it in the comments, help me out and correct me. I believe it's Wappinger and Lenape tribal lands, a tribe that's also distantly in my family lineage, which is a whole other story to explore. But for now, we're going to talk about Tulsa and my research and reacquaintanceship with the city, which is in progress. So Tulsa is here in the middle of everything and in the middle of the story of America. The story of Tulsa is really captivating because it condenses so many of the pillars of American formation: capitalism, resource extraction, occupation, oppression, as well as ingenuity and freedom and collectivity of enterprising Black and brown Americans. It all comes together in a very compact way in the history of Tulsa. So it's a really rich rabbit hole of information for anybody to look into. And I'm sure you guys are gonna be hooked on some of this if you don't know about this history and want to delve into it. And for those of you who are watching, especially Tulsans who are watching, again, I very much appreciate any facts and resources that you can add into the comment section so that we can all learn. So I have very personal connections to Tulsa, but I'm level 1 at this. And so I just want to for us to keep that in mind, that like I'm still at a distance. Like I'm literally at this moment, I'm here. Like here. And Tulsa is here. And then I was born over here. And then I grew up over here. So we're moving and we're grooving. And I'm a student of my own history. And as the centennial approaches for the Race Massacre, which we'll talk a little bit about later, we're definitely going to see Tulsa's story being told more, which is so important. Just this last week, there were stories in NPR and interviews from two of my relatives, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, Jim Goodwin and Regina Goodwin. And it's amazing that Tulsa is having the kind of visibility that is so greatly needed to the story of Black Wall Street and the story of Greenwood and the story of the Race Massacre and also the land grab. You guys might have watched the HBO show Watchmen. I couldn't really get past like episode 3, but that takes place in Tulsa as a place to kind of reimagine the future. And that's because the story of the thriving community that was Greenwood is like a story that was snuffed out before we got to see it fully unfold. And it would have been an alternate history of America. And so Tulsa lends itself really well to storytelling, especially as storytelling is our #1 export as Americans. So that's just another thing that I want people to keep in mind as if you are someone who is distant from Tulsa and learning about it, is that histories get used within mass media as examples of people's lives, and then people's lives get condensed into rhetoric that can easily overpower actual action, activism, politics, and economy. So I'm a storyteller, and storytelling is also part of, the spectrum of humanity, justice, art, creation, creativity, and continue to fight for our lives. But storytelling always has an element of the imagination. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we're here to learn, yay. So for tonight, the little roadmap for you guys is I'm going to be delving into my dad's side of the family and my Tulsa connections there, and then into my mom's side with info about the research trip that I took and the massacre and Oklahoma history kind of mixed in. And if all the tech works out well, Jerry Goodwin, who is my cousin who's running for city council, will be joining us at the end of the talk. And it's not going to be linear because part of the family died, is dead, and part of the family is alive. So we're going back and forth, and history never stopped happening. It's just today. Okay, so here we go. Transition back to the wrong slide. We're gonna get it. Here we go. Tulsa. So I had been to Tulsa once as a child and knew a tiny bit about it, but it wasn't until I knew a tiny bit about the city, but it wasn't until last summer when I took the trip there that I really started to learn about it. What I did know, I had learned from my father when my grandfather passed away in 2017 and my dad was doing the obituary. So when Lucas and I got back in contact with each other last year about something else that we were working on, he told me he was in Tulsa at the Artist Fellowship and asked if I wanted to do some formal and funded research, because that's what we need. So I jumped at the opportunity to be able to connect with a part of myself that I said, as I just said before, is both living, because I've got half of my side of the family in Tulsa is living, thriving, and active, and the other side is they died. My grandpa's died. So in a 1-week trip at the end of August, which was also my first trip as a research trip as an artist, I got to meet some really amazing people, and overall I was moved, sometimes overwhelmed, by the experience of being in a community that knows its history, and therefore the people I met had an energy and a clarity to their purpose, which was something I think I've been seeking my entire life. And the clarity of that purpose is what the man tries to take away from us by erasing our history and severing generational ties in a community. So going there was like a beautiful experience of living connection that I so sincerely hope I can continue after this this quarantine is over. So this is my grandfather, and on my dad's side, the Tulsa lineage is paternal. And this is Archie George Brown, the late, the great, so zesty for life. He was born in Tulsa on the 4th of July. Happy birthday, Gramps. In 1927, and he died in 2017 at age 90. He was born in the wake of the Race Massacre, which happened in 1921. My grandfather, who, still talking about my grandpa, he was an only child, and he grew up in the Greenwood Archer Pine area, also called the Greenwood District or the Greenwood neighborhood, as you'll hear people talking about it. And he became a delivery boy for the Oklahoma Eagle at a young age. And around that time, that's when he earned his nickname Zip, for being so speedy at his job and his errands. And the Oklahoma Eagle, which we'll talk more about later, is the 10th oldest Black newspaper in the country. And it's owned and operated by the Goodwins, who are my cousins on the mom's side of the family. So mom's side, dad's side. But back then, they were just the Goodwins and the Browns, families who knew each other and worked side by side in the same community. So my grandpa was born just 6 years after the Race Massacre in 1921. During the 13 years of his adolescence, Greenwood was rebuilding itself literally from the ashes, but also at age 13, World War II was beginning. And the United States' need for workers in aerospace was so great that the government under Roosevelt had to make discrimination illegal under Executive Order 8802, which is like usually the case in the United States. Is there's an advancement for civil rights for Black people when they need us to go fight in a war. Also, side note, just knowing today that war doesn't require physical manpower, and there's artificial intelligence and automation and big data and robotics that are already consolidating power. Big question is, what are they going to do with the bodies, which is to say our bodies? COVID, right? Okay. So let's just keep that in mind. War is on the brink. I hear the firecrackers all the time. Back to Grandpa. So an estimated 340,000 people relocated to Southern California. And my grandpa was one of these people who moved from Tulsa to Southern California. But there were restrictive covenants where Black people could live. And so my grandfather's family moved from Tulsa to Tulare, Southern California, and later to Fullerton, which is where he met my grandmother, Wilma Jean, and they got married after he returned from the war, from World War II, at the end of World War II, after serving in Germany and France, and was honorably discharged. And they married, and they had my dad and my uncle in Fullerton, and they tried to move across the railroad tracks, which is where their house was, but they were redlined out by white residents. I'm still talking about California, but I say this so we get the picture. They were redlined out of the neighborhood by people who were protesting, even though at that time redlining was already illegal. So like many Black people who had migrated from the central states, and my grandma was from Kansas, they then moved into the Compton Rosewood area, which became the home of many intact, working, close-knit Black families. And I just wanted to mention that this little history and also to a sidebar of this little history before Black people started moving into Compton and white people consequently started moving out of it. A large population of Japanese American farmers had lived in Compton, but they were forced out into internment camps in the 20s and 40s. So the only reason why Compton was such a thriving white community that then was infringed upon by Black people was because they moved the people to concentration camps. So the struggle continues. Yes, right here I've written history repeats itself, boo, and who really likes repeating themselves. So grandpa's Tulsa to California, my dad is California to Virginia, me is California, Virginia to internet. And now we're here in the loop. So going up the ladder, to my grandfather's father and his parents. My grandfather's father, my great-grandfather, was born in 1904 in Tulsa, and his name is Archie Hannibal Brown. And his parents, which are pictured here, were Georgie Brown and Alexander Brown. And I still know very little about these elders, so that's still part of my research that is definitely deeply in progress. And one of the first places that I went to in Tulsa to try to find some genealogical information, try to find some census records, try to find some names on the list and some data that was more conclusive than like Black man 30 years old. So where I went to find some information was the African American Research Center at the Rudisil Regional Library here in Tulsa. Now I'm in Tulsa. It's like I'm there. Is it convincing? Okay, I'm there. So I spoke for a long while to Alicia Latimer, who is a wonderful historian and community resource, and she's very active also in the fight for reconciliation in Tulsa. And I spoke to her for a long time about my family history. Gonna bring them back, about my family history, Georgia Brown and Alexander Brown. So the pictures that are here behind me, these are pictures from a document that I brought with me, which was the program from the Mount Zion Golden Jubilee, which is the Golden Jubilee is like a 50-year celebration of the church. This is a document that had been passed down to my dad and was something that Alicia had never seen before. So it was an exciting moment because both her family and my family were involved in the founding of Mount Zion Church, which is the church that you see here. And I think I might have missed one slide that has a picture of the church as it stands today. But if you guys saw that Instagram flyer where there's a picture of the church in the bottom, that is the church as it currently stands today. And I read. So in this program, it's kind of a comprehensive story of Mount Zion Baptist Church. My great-great-grandfather was a preacher and a deacon of the church, and he and my great-great-grandmother were some of its founding members, some of its 6 founding members. Mount Zion Church was, there we go. Mount Zion Church was organized in 1909, just 9 years after Oklahoma was incorporated into the U.S. So Oklahoma was the 46th state to be incorporated. And for reference, that was 113 years ago from today. So it was incorporated 113 years ago. um, from today. And from 1909 to back to the beginning of the United States, that was 120 years ago. So we're closer in time right now to the incorporation of Oklahoma as a state than like the Revolutionary War was. Also, this country is only 244 years old, which is relevant to everything that we experience. And we're still technically early Americans. Fact check. Yeah. Oklahoma was one of the last territories where tribal land was seized and parceled out during the land grab of 1889. And it's the reason why you saw the wealth of Black Wall Street in Greenwood. Following the Indian Removal Act, also known as Trail of Tears, also known as the biggest redlining gentrification stunt of all time, you had massive movement of the indigenous population, massive forced movement, massive oppression. If anybody in the comments can aid me with some of this history, I would love to circle back to it in the Q&A. So there are dozens of tribes, I believe 37 officially, that now hold land within Oklahoma, but the larger populations are Osage, Cherokee, Choctaw, and Muskogee. And the land is very, very rich in oil. One of the places that I also visited on my trip was the Harweldon Mansion, which was on the other side of town from Greenwood. So Tulsa is kind of, should I have a map? We have a map. Tulsa, here. North Tulsa, Greenwood, Archer. It's kind of hard because I'm reversed. Greenwood, Archer, Pine Gap area. Peoples. River over here, and the waterfront. So the Harweldon Mansion is like down here, and then down here is like the Gilcrease Museum and some mansions. So I went to the Harweldon Mansion because I wanted to check out, like, well, how are the white folks living at this time? Like, what happened to them? What happened to their side of town? It's looking very nice. The grass is very green. It's very cut. Harweldon Mansion. I had a tour, Lucas and I had a tour by a very lovely woman there who told us about Earl P. Harwell, who was an oil magnate who would go on to found the company that became Mobil Oil, as in Exxon Mobil, as in Exxon Valdez, as an oil spill, as an oil slick. He's slick. So that was the kind of wealth that was building up in Tulsa. But what's so interesting about it is that Black people were also benefiting from the resource extraction of oil out of the land. So at that time, it was not unusual to see people making the equivalent of like what was, millions of dollars, some kind of like overnight. There were even teenagers who would be advertising the newspaper for being millionaires. And there was also continued violence with the land parceling, as with the case of the Osage murders, where white people would kill Osage people who had inherited the land, like oil-rich land. White people would kill them for land rights or marry into the tribe and then kill the women. And I believe there's a book, someone correct me on this, I want to say it's like Killing of the Flower Moon. I think Martin Scorsese is making a movie about it. Anyways, this history is very important for understanding the dynamics of race and natural resources within a system of capitalism. To see that while Black Tulsans were able to build up their community on the literal heels of slavery, like just a generation after slavery, they were also only able to make Tulsa, or largely able to make Tulsa this destination for Black wealth because of the natural resources which were only available to them because white people stole them. So Alexander Brown and Georgie Brown were both from Tennessee, born in 1870, which is the same year that slavery was abolished in Tennessee. And I don't know much about their lives and their access to education during Reconstruction, but I do know that he was a preacher, and the two of them are founders of the church. So I presume they could read the word. The Bible is important because it teaches people how to read. That's what it's about. It's about Jesus and he saves, but really literacy saves. They started their services in a wooden schoolhouse, and later a wood frame building that they called the Tabernacle. So here we go back to that side, the Tabernacle, which was built by C. Henry and the congregation until the church was finished in April 1921. So it took six years to build. But just 2 months later, the church was completely burnt to the foundation. From this to this, by the irritated white Tulsans during the massacre. Yes, I say irritated somewhat tongue-in-cheek because they burnt acres and acres of land, looted, killed, and stole. More on that in just 1 second. Mount Zion is a very important landmark in Greenwood because along with Vernon AME, which is another church, and the Oklahoma Eagle, they were the only really large Black institutions that survived the massacre in Greenwood. Vernon AME was also leveled, and similarly, the congregation met in the bombed out basement as they worked to reconstruct their building and community. The state tried to further eradicate Greenwoodians by passing an ordinance that stating that no rebuilding could take place unless it was entirely in brick, which was time consuming and would have eventually forced the Greenwood people out before they could make habitable wooden structures. So let's just pause and think about that for a second. So Black people are accruing wealth at a speed that is uncomfortable for white Tulsans. There's an incident, and this incident is used as an excuse to burn down an entire burgeoning neighborhood of families. And then they're told that they can't rebuild unless they do it in one specific material. They can't just make wooden structures. So Buck Colbert Franklin, who was an attorney and is also the father of the icon and historian John Hope Franklin, worked out of a tent following the massacre. And Buck Colbert Franklin sued the city of Tulsa and won in the Oklahoma Supreme Court to overturn that brick building mandate, which made it possible for Blacks to rebuild in Greenwood. So what took initially 12 years for them to build this first church from 1915 until 1921 now took 31 years to rebuild from 1921 to 1952. 12 years, then 31 years. But eventually they did rebuild. We rebuilt. And Alicia, let's go back to the library. I like the library. And Alicia was really excited. Let me see. Oh, I lost my little place. Alicia was really excited to see this document because her family, the Latimer, the document being that Jubilee document that I just showed you pics from, the Latimers were integral to that rebuilding phase over that period of 30 years and also afterwards in the church and also just in the community at large in Tulsa. I did get to go to see the church at a quiet hour, and it was really beautiful to see it from the inside and not just the outside. I have a pic I can show you guys after like my whole presentation. I have some extra pics I can show you guys. So I didn't find very much else by way of genealogical information at the library other than a list of my great grandfather's siblings, which is a start. But what I did find in talking to Alicia was this amazing feeling that's something between investigative journalism and being at your auntie's house and hearing family stories. And as an artist and in the way I work, that was totally new and really fun. As the week continued, I realized that I was having so much more fun than I ever thought I would have when dealing with such a heavy history. And that fun was largely due to meeting the other side of my family, which are the Goodwins. Yay! So on my mom's side, my grandfather, who these are the Goodwins, Jim, Regina, Jerry. On my mom's side, my grandfather, Clay Mitchell, had a mother, and her name was Ethel Emma Osby Mitchell, and she had a sister named Jean Osby. So my great-grandmother's sister is Jean Osby, and Jean Osby was married to E.L. Goodwin, and they had 8 children, including Jim Goodwin, and Jean and E.L. Goodwin had many grandchildren who include Regina and Jerry. So these are all my cousins, and there's also more siblings and cousins who are important to Tulsa history. But I'm just going to focus on E.L., Jim, Regina, and Jerry today. So earlier, I mentioned the newspaper that my grandfather on my father's side delivered, which is the Oklahoma Eagle. And the Oklahoma Eagle is currently owned and operated by my incredible 80-year-old cousin, Jim Goodwin, who is a firecracker and just amazing. And he inherited the paper from his father and grandfather. In 1912, it's a little history about the paper. In 1912, Andrew Jackson Smitherman, no relation, founded the Muskogee Star, which was the first long-running daily black paper in Oklahoma. And then he moved to Tulsa and started the Tulsa Star. Water. This presentation brought to you by water. He started the Tulsa Star. And then he hired James Henry Goodwin, a Mississippi native with just a 4th grade education who migrated to Tulsa as his business manager. And who migrated to Tulsa and became his business manager in 1916. So the Tulsa Star chronicled the events leading up to the breakout of the massacre in 1921, which is one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in the United States. I didn't put any pictures of it in this presentation, but since you guys are on the internet, you could go and look up some pictures while I tell you this story. Actually, I might tell you guys to look up some other pictures, but yeah, if you haven't seen images of the Race Massacre, feel free to look that up during this portion. So the Race Massacre happened in 1921. Now, remembering that the land grab was in 1889, and then only 20 years later, Oklahoma was incorporated as a state, and then it was only 12 years after that that the massacre happened. So Greenwood had really quickly become a thriving Black-owned community. And as so many of the terrible stories in this country begin, one day, a few years after World War I is over, a Black teenage boy named Dick Rowland and a white teenage girl, Sarah Page, were in an elevator, and they have some interaction. Karen, Amy Cooper. So she goes running out of the elevator, and the next day, May 31st, Dick Rowland is arrested and taken to the courthouse. And the Tulsa Tribune, which was a white paper, published an article titled "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in Elevator." So you have the newspaper directly giving people the Tulsans the directive to pursue this young boy. And white citizens show up to the courthouse with guns. Black citizens, fearing he will be lynched, also come to the courthouse with guns. And then we see what happens when black people show up with guns. So shots are fired, and a number of the white people who jumped to the courthouse were shot, and a couple of the black people were shot. And then white Tulsans go on a rampage, burning, robbing, and looting 35 square blocks of what was the wealthiest black community in America at the time. And the body counts that you see online will say like 300 black people died. It's nowhere near what most black Tulsans to believe to be the death toll for this event, which they believe to be thousands of people. And there are oral history accounts of bodies being dumped in the river or buried somewhere. It's like trauma. I'm gonna go back to just this is the Oklahoma legal office. Okay, sorry guys. Thousands of people dumped in the river or buried somewhere, perhaps under the baseball field. A lot of people think that the bodies are buried under the baseball field in a mass grave. And right now there is a commission that isn't investigating this. And I'm going to take a little detour here. What was really interesting, I talked to a historian at Oklahoma State University. Tulsa University, TU. There's still a lot of hesitance on the part of white Tulsans to acknowledge that any of this happened. There's a lot of silence, and it's alarming when you think about how compact, recent, and catastrophic these events were. But it just goes to show you how much deep work we have to do in recognizing and remediating, reconciling for the past. So as people are being attacked and taken from, brutalized in the city, 60% of the population was held in internment camps in Tulsa for 10 days. 60% of the black population was held in internment camps for 10 days in Tulsa, in their former neighborhood that they had once lived in and built up. I believe one of the camps was in, I want to say, the Brady Theater, and now there's a movement to change the name. I'm forgetting his first name. Help me out, comments. But I want to say he was Matthew Brady. Who was a statesman, white statesman, believe the Klansman. But I think that's one of the locations where the internment camps was. We'll fact check it in a second. So in the matter of a week, so much was destroyed. And to this day, we're only sitting here having this conversation now because it's never really been fully reconciled. So after the massacre, James Henry Goodwin's son, E.L. Goodwin, became interested in buying the newspaper. And though he was initially rebuffed by the managing editor, Theodore Bauman, he was able to purchase the paper after Bauman died in 1936. So then the paper passed from E.L. Goodwin to Jim Goodwin, who owns it and runs it today. Jim is a lifelong Tulsan and a decorated attorney who has won cases in the Supreme Court. He has met and knows so many incredible people. He's just an amazing human being with so much energy and makes so many connections within the city. And he's one of the great keepers of Tulsa history. and I'd love to be able to do a separate event where we could have Jim on here and share some of his stories. His niece is Regina Goodwin, who is a state representative, and I had the honor of hearing her speak, well, also just meeting her, and she's a hero, major, and hearing her speak at Vernon AME during a Cory Booker rally back in other times in August 2019, and she works on various business, commerce, education, and health committees as part of her service as state representative, and is a staunch fighter for the people. It's also a talented artist. So one of the stories that she told me that doesn't get told much in the mainstream news helped me to understand what happened to Greenwood after they rebuilt. So if you'll just hold an image in your mind for a second, the image that went out in the email and on my Instagram and on OK Number One's Instagram, the image of the church against the blue background that has been fully rebuilt in like the 40s and 50s. Not all of Greenwood came back. As it stands right now, there's only about a block that's kind of what it used to be. But Vernon AME was able to rebuild, the Oklahoma Eagle was able to rebuild, as well as Mount Zion. But then in the 70s, urban renewal happened, and all across the country, highways were built through Black communities. So there was a highway that was built through Greenwood, which is a kind of textbook development move to stop community from forming in Black and brown neighborhoods. And just to let you guys know a little bit about like the fight that's still going on, this came up in a conversation where Regina was telling me about the contracting bids, and it was something like, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars going to build a highway, and there were a number, you know, dozens of qualified Black contractors who had gone through the necessary certification programs, but none of them got any of the bids for the construction. So the highway is built through the neighborhood, and then the city and state makes it so that none of the people who are affected by this construction can at least benefit from it by with jobs and work. So this is another one of those things I'd love to talk about down in the Q&A and in the comments, is urban renewal, and it's another area of research that I am looking more into and want to like move into, because it also, I think Lucas can speak a little bit more about this. He knows more about OPEC and how it relates to the oil industry. So right now we are coming to the end of my portion, and I'm just gonna text Jerry. And hopefully he'll pop online. We might have a little bit of another technical transition. Might have to FaceTime him in. So throughout all of this history, though, throughout the massacre and the highs and lows with urban renewal and all of the work that Tulsans have done, Black Tulsans as well as Indigenous Tulsans and other POC, to make this history come out of the darkness, there is an energy and a spirit of pushing forward. And I really felt that when I was in Tulsa in a really amazing way. It was very much alive. I just wanted to talk a little bit about another person in Tulsa, a major figure in Tulsa, whose name is Julius Piggies, Mr. Julius Piggies, who Regina and Jerry and Jim introduced me to. And he is an aeronautics engineer who, like Jim, has been a cornerstone in the city of Tulsa working for education and justice and reconciliation. And he is the person who really spearheaded the construction of this monument, which is in the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park. There were a number of people who worked on constructing this, but Mr. Pease was really the force going forward. And this sculpture was made by Ed Dwight, who has his own incredible history. Ed Dwight was selected by the Kennedy administration to be the first Black astronaut, but after training at NASA, after training to be the first Black astronaut, NASA did not take him on board for racism. But Dwight went on to be an engineer, and today he is a prolific sculptor. This is one of his sculptures. There's two in the park. There's another one. I can pull up a picture of it. And it shows figures of a Black Tulsan with a gun and a white Tulsan with a gun and a Black person with their hands up to show, I think really to show what was unique about that moment was you did have Black people coming with firearms, like in a country where firearms is our Second Amendment. To show Black people with guns is, to show them fighting as equals. I hate that that's like the criteria, guns, but also let's get real and let's prepare. Let's use our constitutional rights. So this park took a major push to construct. It was not easy. They really had to fight for the space that this park is in, and this sculpture tells the story of Tulsa from the ground up. So it starts with showing West Africans being taken from slavery, and then it wraps around to show the Trail of Tears. It shows the land grab. It shows Reconstruction. It shows the end of slavery. It shows the urban renewal. It shows gentrification. And it ends with young Tulsans reaching upward for the future and reaching out for the present. And so I'm going to see, now that we're talking about the present, I'm going to see if I can get Jerry on the line and also see where I am in Zoom land. I think Lucas is still there. Let's see if this works. Thank you guys for your technical patience. And I got my FaceTime. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so I am not getting Jerry right now, but I also know that he's in a meeting with a youth group at the moment. So he was, I'm sure, doing something that requires attention. And so let's for a moment just transition into a Q&A. If anybody has questions to ask, I'm happy to answer. I'm now looking at Twitch. And then if Jerry pops in, we'll give Jerry the floor. So yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to have a convo, I'm here. I'm also here. And oh, I tried to chat. Oh, I had to log in. Let's see. How does this work? How is the newspaper now? The newspaper is operational, fully operational. You can go to, let's see. You can go to their website, which is the OklahomaEagle.net. And I just spoke with Jim today, actually. And they are transitioning the newspaper into a little bit, I think, doing more kind of media stories. And they were just featured in a LA Times article about Jim Goodwin, about Tulsa, about the massacre, and got a lot of response from that. And so in light of that, as well as all of the protests happening around George Floyd's murder and George Floyd's life, they are looking to do kind of like global reaching stories, or in the same way that what happened to George Floyd really mobilized many people. I'm paraphrasing Jim right now. Mobilized so many people to action because it was so obviously a breach of just humanity and human dignity. I mean, there is no way you can watch that entire video and just not be crushed and just not have your like entire breath taken away by what you're witnessing, particularly because this moment is only possible via technology. So it's also the dissonance between the power of technology and how advanced technology is, when at the same time the human behavior is so primitive and it is just so painful, and it's so Derek Chauvin is basic as AF. Like, to kill somebody is just, that's basic. So the Eagle is now looking towards what kind of stories can they promote that are, in the same way, really galvanizing, because they just kind of tap into people's humanity. And in general, the Oklahoma Eagle, from its entire time as a Black newspaper, has always put forward stories of justice, has always put forward stories of what is happening in the community, and has also promoted Black leaders in the community. That's what is so incredible about Tulsa, is because you do have this legacy of Black Wall Street, the thriving Black community there. The intergenerational passion and valuing of history has remained fully intact, which is not something that has happened in every Black community. That has been destroyed in a lot of Black communities. Okay. Yes, the Oklahoma Eagle is also working to digitize their archives, including archives from the Tulsa Star. And there are archives from the Tulsa Star at the library, but they're on like microfilm. So that's going to be incredible that they are digitized. Okay. Question from Lindsay. Hi. I'm curious about how this is currently being educated in schools. I was in Tulsa a couple years ago and it all seems so fresh. Do you know what they're teaching kids today about this conversation? I'm not up to date, like 2020, with what is being taught in schools about Tulsa, although I would guess that, nothing has really changed in the last year, especially since kids are not even in school now. It is missing from the history books. I think when I was talking to Alicia, she was speaking to that and was saying that it was just glossed over, in the same way that history books will try to call slavery immigration, or we call concentration camps internment camps. It's not something that most Tulsans are willing to reckon with. Even when I was talking to one historian at TU, who's a white historian, he was very of the mind of like, well, that's what some people say, of like, well, maybe they dropped bombs from planes. But then you have all of the stories of the people who were there to speak against that. And so one of the great resources that is there in Tulsa is the Greenwood. I don't want to botch the name. The Greenwood Historical Society, and they maintain a history, presentations, as well as like space around that. But for as far as education, I don't think it's not in any textbooks. I mean, I grew up in Virginia, and we barely had anything about slavery in textbooks. We didn't learn about any of the important Black leaders or Indigenous leaders, other people of color. So to answer that question, I don't know, but I don't think they're teaching very much. They had just started teaching it in school like a year or two ago. Yeah, it's very new. It's all incredible how new it is. I mean, that's what I was mentioning before. Like, we are early Americans. We have to remember that. It doesn't really make sense because I literally have like 5 screens open right now and like wireless lights, but we are early Americans still at the beginning stages of this country and this idea of democracy. Oh, okay. Lex, can you sneak preview your proposal to Greenwood Centennial in case someone will give you a bunch of money to do it? I can. So I proposed something for the Greenwood Centennial. And actually, I don't know what's happening with Centennial with regards to COVID. But Tulsa, as a city, won $1 million from the philanthropical arm of Bloomberg to do a series of art projects that are led by 2 artists. And I applied to do a project. My project was to create a score, a musical score that would be performed live across Tulsa by like dozens of musicians who are playing different instruments. I believe that music plays such an important role in communal space, in therapy, in embodying emotions. And also, it's a project that I wanted to do because the history of Tulsa is very cinematic and lends itself to that kind of feeling. But I thought it would be very powerful and moving to see what would happen if you're walking down the street and instead of, seeing something that represented the massacre or seeing kind of images, that you would hear it and feel it, and it would be in your body, and it would be this kind of collective moment, but also something that would touch different corners of the city. One thing about Tulsa is that it's still very divided. The street, what is the street that is on one side? It's MLK Boulevard. It's like a Martin Luther King Avenue, but on the other side, it's like Cincinnati. And the street it like ends. It's like one side is MLK that's on Greenwood, and the other side is like Smith Street. I think it's like Cincinnati, something like that. And so it's still very divided. And so I had this idea that if there's music playing, that you also can't escape it, but you can't escape it in a way that's like uh, positive. Like you shouldn't be able to escape this history, as painful as it is, and also as painful as our present is, and as like crushing as it feels sometimes. We have to stay in it to get through it. When we try to just get like above it or behind it, or I don't know, around it, without going through it, it just keeps happening and happening and happening again. So the idea is to create a musical piece where you're thinking and feeling the centennial, and you're able to also just have like an emotional connection to it, because I really believe, like, I mean, just so much of life, so much transformational thinking happens first in the body before it really happens in the mind. So the idea would be to stimulate that, and then also to compose some poetry and have it fly above the sky in skywriting, as a way to create a different narrative for Tulsa's sky than the one of bombs dropping. I thought that there should be some beautiful words up there. What's so interesting is actually one of my earlier ideas was also an idea that Jim had independently, and was also an idea that another artist I know has had independently, of doing kind of like holograms or holographs that kind of like pop up and show you what Tulsa used to be. So that's something I think we'll definitely see. But I don't know what's going to happen with, of course, with COVID and the rally that just happened last week. I mean, it's good that it wasn't as attended, but we'll see what happens with this election. COVID and what kind of world that we're living in a year from now. But yes, the centennial, we're at year 99, and the centennial is coming up soon. So I'm just gonna try calling Jerry one more time, and he's at a minister's program right now, so with a youth group. So if we don't get him, please. Oh, I see it popping up. Hold on, I am going to. Lucas, should I pop off the screen share? Oh, no, not yet. Well, look, Jerry Goodwin, City Council. Like, share, subscribe. Please donate to his campaign. He is of Tulsa, a man of Tulsa. He's a professor. He's going back to school this semester. He really wants to create programs that will benefit the youth of Tulsa and help revitalize from the ground up. So I'm going to try to get him onto the phone just one more time. No dice. Well, I have to say that is on me, because I asked him a bit last minute if he would be able to come on this call. So what I will do is I will share with you guys some information on my Insta right here. This is so confusing. All right, got a few more too many screens going on. Um, and if there's no more questions from you guys, then I will just go into my little wrap up and say that if you haven't checked it out already, I do have a book that's available from Gender Fail Press. It's called Consciousness, and it's a one of a kind risograph book. And it has poems and songs and images from 8 years of my work in video and in performance. Some of those songs do have to do with family history that I talked about tonight. And the book is in the collection of the Met, the MoMA, the Whitney, and New York Public Library, and some other amazing collections. It's limited edition. So head on over to Gender Fail Press. My website, my Instagram is here. So you guys can check it out. And then I just wanted to head on into a little hype up of next week. So next week on OK No 1/OK number 1, Jaden Jenick is going to be speaking about why abolition can't wait. Jaden's father actually worked with Jim Goodwin as an attorney for many years, and so Jaden is going to be talking about abolition and process of abolition. So I'm very excited to tune into that and to learn. And I also will add this, that, sorry guys. Here we go. Okay, and also just wanted to mention that Black and Pink, the Black and Pink organization, is an abolitionist organization dedicated to supporting Black and brown, queer, and trans incarcerated people. So please check out Black and Pink tonight. Check out their work. Donate if you are able to, and make sure that you tune in to Jaden's talk. And then I also want to just say a big thank you, guys, to everybody here who tuned in. Thank you so much for your time, your attention. Right now, it is really so deeply appreciated on a Friday night, no less. And thank you so much to Lucas. You're doing incredible work at OK number 1, which is run entirely by Lucas. And oh, here's Jerry. OK number 1's run entirely by Lucas, and he's doing all kinds of interesting work with artists as well as activists. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Lucas. It's been amazing to work with you over the years, especially on things that relate to technology, surveillance, protecting ourselves in the light of surveillance. And so now, thank you. We're going to try Jerry one more time. Third time is the charm. Here we go. We're going to try it on FaceTime. Hi, Jerry. Hello. 1 second. I can hear you. I'm just going to, I just have to share this screen. and we hope it works out. I'm gonna check the comments. Can somebody in the comments let me know if it's working? Okay, you're on screen. It's working. We did it. I think we did it.
Yes.
Jerry? Hello? Let's see. Okay, we lost Jerry, but we got Jerry, which means we'll be back soon. Now you guys see behind the mask. It's green. I wasn't really anywhere at all. Okay. Let's see. Let me text him. Un momento. Okay, let's try again. Oh. Revenge of the Devices. Also, when did they start becoming called devices? Okay, here we go. Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, all right. Maybe I'm in a better space now.
Okay, I think we're working. I think we're on. Thank you, Jerry, so much for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. We've got a really engaged chat room for you here, and I just finished talking about a bit of our shared family history. Maybe you could start by telling us maybe a little bit about the meeting you were just at, and some of the things that are happening in Tulsa today, and the work that you're doing, and how we can support you.
Awesome. Well, I just attended a meeting with ministers, and this is probably happening all over the country, where ministers are coming together and beginning to evaluate how best to improve relations between our minority communities and law enforcement. These are long overdue conversations, and maybe the conversations that have been had in the past, we were not able to develop solutions or address issues so that we would not be seeing the series of events that we're seeing right now. So today was the first meeting of two ministerial groups coming together to develop a common agenda that we're going to present to the mayor, to our chief of police, who happens to be African American, and to other members of law enforcement. So that was the value of today's meeting. And for the benefit of your viewers and listeners, again, my name is Jerry Goodwin, and in addition to being related to Ms. Lexi, I'm also a candidate for City Council District 1 here in the city of Tulsa. This will be my second time running. My primary legislative issues are law enforcement, economic development, and youth programs. I'm the only candidate for office that has issued opinions with regard to recent law enforcement issues here in our community. And what makes me different from our current counselor is our current counselor has a conflict of interest. Her husband currently is a police officer, so she's limited into what she can say and what she can do with reference to law enforcement. I'm not going to be an advocate for defunding our law enforcement department here, but I am going to talk about resetting priorities and looking at how we can use some of those resources to improve some of our youth programs. that's very important to me. In terms of economic development, we are a food desert in comparison to the other districts in our city, and I'd like to see what we can do to address that issue as well as make access to other amenities that are available to all the other districts in our city. And then, as I mentioned to you earlier, youth programs. It troubles me right now that during this time of the year, that with school being out, unfortunately our libraries being closed and many of our parks being closed, what are our young people doing? What forms of entertainment and or activity do we have available to them? And we don't have very many, and I think that leads to other outcomes that we don't want to see. And so I'm going to be championing opportunities to find things for our young people to do during the summer months.
That all sounds so important and so necessary. Maybe could you talk a little bit about maybe what has happened to make it a food desert in Tulsa, and also maybe what are some of the factors that have contributed to the need for these youth programs and solutions?
Well, very good questions. We are perhaps characteristic, unfortunately, of some other minority communities throughout the country where we've not had the type of economic development to occur in our communities, and as a result, we have had to go to other places within the city to have access to food, to have access to just department stores, and going to a nice restaurant with one's family. And so that's been something that is characteristic of so many of our communities, but we have to create the incentives. We have to somehow develop a plan that is an incentive for business to want to be in our community. And that is something that we need to do. And so I'll be championing that. But what I want to do, and I think it's going to aid us to a great degree, is that we should have in our community, not like they have where the National Urban League puts together a state of Black America. I want to do a state of Black Tulsa, which helps to establish a baseline, and then every year we're able to evaluate what progress we've made, where we continue to see there be opportunities for improvement, and each year we can look at, have a measuring stick, and at least look to see what steps we're taking to, whether it be the food desert issue, whether it be economic development and job opportunities for those residing in our community, whether it be access to youth programs, whether it be even our concerns for the environment. What are we doing to make our community a sustainable environment? And so I'm hoping that once we set these priorities, then we can begin to measure how we're making progress or how we're advancing with reference to these priorities. And so again, law enforcement, economic development, and youth programs. But our community is not unlike so many other communities across the country. But I want to be sure that in some way we develop a plan to begin to address those issues, and there will continue to be issues in our community.
Yes. I'm wondering what has the process of running a campaign been like in the last few weeks, months, over this year, and what has it been like doing the campaign now versus the prior time that you had run for office?
Well, of course, our community is just hypersensitive to what's going on nationally and maybe even internationally. And so it's been an exciting time. It's an unfortunate, it's mixed blessings. I'm very excited that the people in our community are more actively engaged about current events, and we've been showing with our feet and with our voices our concerns that in our community, and we've probably not been speaking as loudly as we've ever been here most recently. So I'm very, very excited about that, and I think we're blessed as a community that we're speaking out about those issues that are most important to us. And so that is what's unique about this campaign versus the campaign 2 years ago, where we may have had some of these issues, but the death of Mr. Floyd has just ignited in us desire to be sure that enough is enough, and we are sharing that message with so many in elected office and in office of being able to make a difference, and we're letting them know that enough is enough and that we want change, and I'm hoping and I'm anticipating and expecting that that change will occur.
Awesome. Well, we are so lucky to have had you here on our broadcast. And how can we donate to your campaign and help fuel some of these solutions that you're proposing and that you're championing as a lifelong Tulsan and as a Tulsan who is in the legacy of so many great fighters for justice? How can we donate and support the campaign?
Yes, ma'am. Well, I appreciate that. I'll share with you. We have a website, electjerrygoodwin.com, and then also I'm on Reddit and also Facebook. So with Reddit, it really gives it an incredible platform to discuss issues, and I've just enjoyed it here most recently as we've joined it, interacting with voters and others in the community on the issues of the day. Facebook, we have a Facebook page. I just mentioned the website. And so if you'd like to contribute, or if there's an opportunity for you to contribute, go to our website. At the top of our page, there's a donate button that gives you that opportunity to do so. But if there are concerns that you have, there are issues that you have, then I'd be open to listening and learning from each and every one of you regarding those concerns. We also have a campaign office on Greenwood here in Black Wall Street, which many of you may know. A year from now, less than a year from now, we will be recognizing the 1921 race riot, which was considered to be a major event not only in African American history, but in American, and I would suggest world history. We'll be recognizing that event a year from now. But feel free to reach out to me by way of my Facebook page, like Jerry Goodwin, or the website, and or on Reddit. It's also known as Elect Jerry Goodwin, and I'll be more than glad to communicate and share my thoughts with you, as well as I'd be more than glad to receive your thoughts and ideas as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry. We look forward to talking more, interacting with you. I hope that Tulsans who are in this chat reach out to Jerry and connect with him over his website, electjerrygoodwin.com, and also over Reddit. We'll let you go because I can tell that you're on your way to another important meeting. That's what I love about the Goodwins. It's constant. It's fun. We're going here. We're going there. We're talking with the people because the process of justice and community building is really a lot of fun. And so I thank you for being one of my family members who has introduced me to that.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Jerry. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll be out here rooting for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a good night, Jerry. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Lots of love.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So there you have it, guys. That was Jerry. We're getting back into the screen sharing. Let me know if I am back. Okay, we're back. So just wrapping up our talk. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. And please donate and support Jerry Goodwin because he is literally in the legacy of all that I have told you about, and not just because he's a family member, but because there's a number of families in Tulsa who have been upholding this history and upholding the community and the values, family values, values of life, you know, just good old-fashioned values. And, you know, we are trying to come together and coalesce in this 21st century, and we're constantly rebuilding. So lots of love to you guys. Again, please take care of yourself I've been starting to think of just 2020 as like cardio. Okay, there's a lot of information that we have to take in constantly. It is unbelievable. It is overwhelming. But if you just think of it as like cardio and just like work it out and we just sweat it out, we will make it through. So once again, thank you to Lucas so much. Thank you guys for watching. Please check out Black and Pink, which helps POC and trans people in the fight towards abolition. Jaden's talk is next week. And the cause that I'd like to call on you to support is Black Girls Code. So please check out Black Girls Code and donate to them if you are able to, because the children are the only ones who are really going to be able to turn this thing around, and we need more Black women coding. Thank you guys so much. Lots of love to you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Peace and blessings. Take care.
Thank you, Lex.
Over and out. Lucas, you are amazing.
You're a
Once
star.
again, please check out Lucas Wrench's work as an artist, a curator, or organizer, and at OK #1. Like, share, subscribe. Bye, everybody.
Signing out.